All right, so chiropractors, if you know your metrics, it makes it really easy to know how to improve your practice. For example, you can just look at your metrics and you can just say, oh, this one's lower than what it should be, right? And then we could test things to see how we can improve that. But if you don't know any of your metrics and you don't know how they fit together, it's kind of hard to do that. So that's what this video is for. We do the same thing with clients, except we do it on a more comprehensive scale. And so if you want to do it yourself, then hopefully this is helpful. And if you'd like us to do it for you, then hopefully this gives you more insight into our process so you can understand it better. Let's go ahead and dive in. Now, this video does involve some math, but don't worry, it's all super simple, basic arithmetic. I would recommend doing this in a spreadsheet because it's going to be way easier to do all the calculations. What I'm going to be showing you this in is on a whiteboard because I think it'll be easier to show you how it all works together. But if I was actually going to calculate it all, I would do it on a spreadsheet. All right, so we're going to start this off with the numbers that we want to gather so we can go ahead and complete this process. The ones that are bolded here should be in just about every single EHR out there, and so it should be really easy to find those. The other ones, I'll go ahead and tell you where you would want to look for those and then kind of help you quantify some of those. And then we'll probably just gather them all on a spreadsheet and then we'll go through what we would do. So total sales and marketing expenses are basically things like advertising. If you pay someone to do social media marketing for you, any kind of software you use to do any of that kind of stuff, that kind of things. Another thing we would want to quantify in here is your time and how much that is worth. And the reason we want to do this is because we can fairly easily quantify your hourly rate and thus how much money essentially is being put into this. And so this gives us a more accurate idea. And then you can test later on how to do things cheaply. So as an example, let's say you spend 4 hours per week on marketing. And let's say that on average, you make $200 an hour. So you're spending $800 a week on marketing, essentially. If we say that you get 8 new patients per week, just for the example's sake, then if you didn't quantify any of that time, it just looks like you're getting patients for free. But if we do quantify this time, you can see it's actually costing you $800 per week, which means it's $100 per patient. Now that we would see the true cost of what it actually takes of $800 per week in terms of hours, then you could look at doing stuff that makes it cheaper. And then you could spend those hours on serving more patients, right, to make that $800 back. So for example, maybe you could hire someone else, hint, hint, someone like me. Just saying. But whenever we do this, we can easily see, okay, this is how much it's currently costing us. Let's try other things and see if we can get that cost down. So this is an example of total sales and marketing and why we'd want to go ahead and quantify your time as well. If you want to know how much your time costs on average, then go ahead and look at how much money you made in the last, let's say, year, month, or something like that, and then divide that by the number of hours worked. And so most EHRs will count how many hours you have logged in there on the schedule. So that makes it really easy. I would do this 2 ways so that we can go ahead and get, again, a more in-depth view. But if you work extra hours after, let's say you have your 9 to 5, right? And then let's say you stay a little bit longer, maybe an extra 1 or 2 hours per day to catch up on things like patient notes, do things like marketing, that kind of stuff, then I would do both of those hours and we would have things like productive hours, and then we'd have things like admin hours. That's another thing that would give us more metrics and more stuff to look into. And so then you could look at, okay, how much time am I spending on patient notes, for example? Is there something I could do to decrease that, right? Are there any AI note takers or, dictation or that kind of stuff that I could add in to decrease the time I'm taking notes? And then again, for something like marketing, is there someone else I could hire to do stuff like this? Again, hint, hint, you could hire me, just saying. But it's stuff like this that we would want to try and break out as granularly as possible, or at least I like to, and that way we have really in-depth insights and can very easily see which one of these is super high or super low or needs to be fixed, etc. And that way we can have really good metrics overall and then a really good practice overall. So anyway, that's total sales and marketing expense. So these ones, they should all be included in your EHR. Like your EHR should have total number of new patients. It should have total number of appointments. It should have total patients. And I'd go ahead and keep all those over the same time period. That way we have a really consistent picture and consistent metrics and all of that. Now, total number of consultations. If it's not a paid appointment, I just call it a consultation. And that way we have 2 separate things because some people like doing free consultations into an appointment or into them becoming a patient. So if you do this, we'd want to separate those out so that we could see the overall pipeline. So the way we think of this is a pipeline. And so at the beginning, for instance, they might see your ad and then they might call you, then schedule them for an appointment. And then they come in for the appointment. And at that point they pay and they become a patient. And so we're going to be looking at all of those metrics that have to do with all those steps. And that way we can very easily troubleshoot which ones of those are not looking right. And then we can go ahead and fix those and improve everything else. You may do stuff like free consultations. Some chiropractors do it, some chiropractors don't, and they just book people directly into an appointment that they pay for. But if you do this, we would want to go ahead and record this number as well. And so depending on how you do it, it may be in your EHR, it may not be. If it's in your EHR, you might have done stuff like set up free consultations as an appointment type in your EHR, and then you might have scheduled people for those appointment types, right? So you might very easily be able to see your total number of consultations. And then if you don't use any of that, then I'll go over some ways that we can start recording that kind of stuff in the next video. But again, if you do free consultations, then we would want to go ahead and note that down. Oh, and by the way, if you can break out your new patients into different subsegments. So for example, let's say that you have referred new patients and then new patients that come from advertising or Google or that kind of stuff. If you can do that, then again, it just gives us more granular insights into which kind of marketing channel is working best. And then we can, go further in on that one, for example. It just gives us the best insights, again, if we can break it out that in depth. If you can't, no worries, but if you can, then go ahead and try and note those down as well. Now, another thing we would want is number of cancellations and no-shows, and we'd go ahead and bundle those together. And if you do consultations, ideally we can do it for both the consultations, the number of no-shows and cancellations that we had for the consultation specifically, and appointments as a whole. And that way we have the two separate things, and then we can combine them if we want. But that way we can look at each of these and see that maybe, okay, consultations actually have a really high no-show rate, for example, and appointments don't. And so again, it just gives us more in-depth insights. Now, these are a little bit more advanced, but if you can get them, again, even better. So the number of website visitors, if you know this, we can go ahead and look at your website and how efficient it is. Leads/prospects, these are people who are basically interested in your services, but are not yet patients. Again, like our new patients example, if we can break this out into even more in-depth categories like referred leads or leads from advertising or leads from social media, then we can do this. If we can't, no problem. And then the other one is number of scheduled leads. So these are the people who, we have leads, right? Okay, these are people that we can call and we can contact that may be interested. And then we have scheduled leads, and those people schedule a consultation or appointment, but they're not yet patients. Again, this just gives us more in-depth insights into that pipeline like I talked about earlier. And again, ideally we can break this out into categories like referred scheduled leads or scheduled leads from advertising or social media, whatever. All right, now that we have our numbers, let's go ahead and start calculating our metrics. Ideally, we can go ahead and gather all of these and then we'll throw them in a spreadsheet, and then it just makes it super easy to go ahead and overview them and again, see what we can improve. All right, so first up is cost to acquire a customer. You might hear cost per acquisition or customer acquisition cost. It's all the same thing. And this one is total marketing and sales costs divided by the number of new patients. So as an example, let's say you spend $1,500 on ads, and then let's say that we also quantified the time that you spend on marketing and that kind of stuff. And so overall, it comes out to $3,000 per month. Then let's say you have 30 new patients that you get on average. This means that our overall cost to acquire a customer is $100. And so this means it takes us $100 in advertising and marketing costs and all that other stuff in order to get a new patient on average. Now, this is me specifically, but I would break this number out if we can. We have total, which in this our example is $3,000. But if we could break this out more, so for example, in ads, that's $1,500 a month. And then our time or labor, right? That's another $1,500. And so again, I would try and break this out. And so this way we can go ahead and just look at everything and we can see, okay, maybe ads are about where we would expect them to be, but maybe labor's really high. And so we need to look at how we can decrease that one. Again, if we can kind of go more in depth, we don't want to go so uselessly in depth that we're kind of paralyzed with analysis paralysis. But if we can just do stuff like this, where it's really easy to see like, okay, our labor costs in terms of marketing and sales might be kind of high for what we want for, maybe if we're just solo practitioner, we don't want to be spending that much per month in terms of labor. Then again, it just makes it really easy to go ahead and see what numbers we need to improve. And so we can start testing stuff in order to improve those numbers. And so as an example, let's say you're a solo practitioner, instead of you spending $1,500 worth of labor on getting new patients and marketing and that kind of stuff, let's say you instead hire someone out, right? And so let's say this person is a marketing agency and they cost $1,000 per month, just as an example. So we then save $500 per month. And so now our total marketing costs goes to $2,500. And so then let's just say we keep our 30 patients per month. Let's say that's what we usually get on average, right? Obviously sometimes you'll have fluctuations, but let's just say on average this is what we get. And we can very easily see that we just save some money. So now our cost to acquire a customer is $83. And so again, we can just see this one change, just went ahead and saved us some money. So again, this is the kind of stuff we're looking at. Another thing that cost to acquire a customer does, it gives us a very clear input into how much money it takes in order to get a new patient. So in this case, we can see that it takes $100 on average of ad spend in order to get a new patient. And so later we can take this info and we can use it to see if our advertising is profitable. But this now gives us super clear inputs into what it takes in order to get new patients. And so as an example, let's go ahead and say that we wanted to add $100,000 in a year to our practice. And then let's say the average patient spends $500 with us over the course of a year. And for simplicity's sake, we'll say this is profit. In this case, we need 200 new patients. And so in this case, if we need 200 new patients, we can see 200 times 100 means we need to spend $20,000 in ads. And so in this case, we can see that we need to spend $20,000 in ads and labor and all that other stuff in order to get the new patients that we need to add $100,000 to our practice. So cost to acquire a customer is probably one of the more important metrics that we're going to be going over, and this is kind of why. The next metric we're going to be looking at is lifetime value, or LTV, and this is the average amount of money that a patient will spend with you over the relationship with your practice. So with this one, what I like to do is I like to break it out into two numbers. I like to break it out into patient visit average and then average revenue per visit. Again, this just gives us a more in-depth granular view. So LTV is patient visit average multiplied by our average revenue per visit. So PVA is the total number of appointments divided by the number of new patients. And this is over the same period. So for example, let's say that we have 300 appointments per month, and we again have 30 new patients on average per month. So this means our PVA is 10. So the average patient comes in 10 times in total over the course of the relationship with the practice. For average revenue per visit, we calculate this with total revenue and divide that by total visits. Again, we keep this over the same period. So as an example, if we say made $30,000 in a month and we again have those 300 appointments, you can see I'm keeping all the math super round here, but our average revenue per visit is $100. And so now we can calculate LTV, so we can multiply PVA and average revenue per visit in order to get an average lifetime value of $1,000 per patient. This is actually really good if we have this. Most chiropractors that I've seen usually have something like $300 to $500. And so if we have 1,000, we're knocking it out of the park here. And like I said earlier, with knowing our inputs, this is the part where this is how we figure out how many patients we need in order to add the revenue that we want to see. And so earlier we talked about if we want to add $100,000 to our practice and the average patient that stayed with us spent $500 in total, you can see here, this is 1,000. So you can see here, if we have 1,000, then that actually means that we need even less new patients in order to get our $100,000, which means we need to spend even less on ads. And so again, you can see here, improving these metrics overall improves the practice. And so I'd say the two probably most important metrics here, if we were to go ahead and overall lump them together, would be CAC, cost to acquire a customer, and LTV. And again, you saw how we broke LTV into different things, patient visit average and average revenue per visit, and how we broke cost to acquire a customer into those different categories of marketing and sales spend. But I would just say those are probably the two most important metrics here. But the rest of these are definitely really important, and we could use them to go more in depth and see what exact point may be the sticking point and getting a new patient. This one's kind of similar to CAC, and then we can use it to figure out our inputs, but it's called the referred customer ratio. It's the total number of patients divided by the number of referred patients. And so this gives us a like I said, a ratio, and allows us to figure out how many patients we need in order to get a new referred patient. So for example, if we know that we have a total of 100 patients and we get 10 referred patients over that same period of time, then our referred customer ratio is 10. And so this basically means that we need 10 total patients on average in order to get one new referred patient. And so with this, similar to cost to acquire a customer, we use this to figure out our inputs. And this one's pretty important because a lot of chiropractors usually rely on referrals in order to get new patients. So if we know this, we can use this to figure out our critical mass of patients that we need in order to continuously grow just from referrals, just from word of mouth. The other metric we'll need to know is churn. And so let's go ahead and calculate that. So churn is basically the percentage or number of people that leave over a given period of time. And so the way we calculate this is by figuring out what our churned patients are. And this is our patients at the start of the year, right? So P0. And then we add in our new patients. I would just do this over a year, right? You can do this over whatever period you want. I would just do this over a year. And so that's why I'm saying at the start of a year. We then do this over our new patients for the year. Then we subtract our P1, which is patients at the end of the year. So as an example, let's say that our patients at the start of the year are 100. And let's say over the course of the year, we see 40 new patients. And at the end of the year, we have 110 patients. This means that our number of churn patients are 30. So basically 30 patients either left the practice or we don't see them very frequently. So what we do is we take our churned patients and we divide that by the number of patients we had at the starting period. And this gives us our churn rate, which in this case is 30%. Now to figure out our critical mass of patients, what we would actually want to do is we'd want to take our referred customer ratio up here, and we'd actually want to flip these, and so we would make it a percentage instead of just a ratio. Keeping it as a ratio, as a number, gives us a good input, right? So we know we need 10 patients in order to get one new referred patient, but it's not very useful for this specific equation. And so basically this would give us 10%. So we would then take our churn ratio over here of 30%, and we would divide that by 10%. And then we're just going to multiply it by 100. And so this gives us 300. Basically, our critical mass of patients in this specific example is 300. So we need 300 patients in order to offset the number of patients that are leaving the practice each year. That's if we were only going to do it off of referrals. You can see that in this specific example, that might be kind of rough, right? We would probably want to try and reduce, well, both of these numbers. We want to reduce this one so that more people are referring, and we'd also want to reduce this one so that more people are staying. But this is, again, just an example of what we would want to look at for inputs and how we would figure out our critical mass. Now, just as a note, if we improve the referred customer ratio right here, and we decrease this number, that would mean that this number would actually go up. So for example, let's say that this number right here becomes 50. So it's 50 over 10. That means that we see one new referred patient for every 5 patients we have, which means that we would actually have 20%, right? And so in that case, if this then became 0.2, this 10%, then this would actually get cut in half to 150. And so again, that's just kind of a note as to how the math would work out here. If you're plugging this into a spreadsheet, I would do both these versions of it. And then this one we would use for our calculation for churn. And this one we would use to get a good idea of the number of patients that we need in order to get a new referral patient. Now let's go ahead and look at some pipeline metrics and kind of see what the overall pipeline looks at and what steps we might need to improve. These will have to do with some of the advanced numbers that we grabbed earlier. And so if you don't have those, don't worry for now, you can get them later. But if you do have them, then it will give us way more in-depth insights, and we can look at the exact pipeline and the overall pipeline, see what exact steps we need to improve. So first of all, I would go ahead and calculate our no-show rate. And when it comes to this, I like to lump our no-shows plus our cancellations. And then obviously we divide this by total number of appointments. Now, like I said earlier, I would try and do this for both consultations and appointments themselves, if you can do that, if you have the numbers for it. So your consultations almost always will have a higher no-show and cancellation rate than your regular appointments. And so for example, when it comes to the no-show and cancellation rate of consultations, of free consultations, you might have 3 out of 5 people not show up. And when it comes to your regular appointments, you might have, 1 out of 10 people not show up. And so you will see big differences here. You'll also see differences depending on how you do your advertising and how you schedule people. I wouldn't worry about the getting super in-depth on this stuff, because most of the time you'll look at your overall cancellation no-show rate for appointments if you schedule new potential patients for that immediately. And then if you have consultations, that's something just completely different. And so you're almost always going to be dealing with new patients there, or potential new patients. And so we would just classify that in a world of its own. If you do consultations, I would kind of just ignore doing no-show rate, because, well, you'll see here in a bit, but it's a lot easier to track the whole pipeline if you track your leads and stuff like that. And then we don't even need to worry about our basically no-show rate. But I would have the no-show / cancellation rate if you do just straight to an appointment from new patients. So I'll just show you how that applies. So for this one, we'll want to go ahead and know all our lead sources. Like I said earlier, leads are people who you can contact who are interested in your services. And so for example, someone who calls you from Google ads or who inputs a form on Facebook from Facebook ads, those are both people who are leads. So let's say that you run a campaign on, let's just call it Facebook, and you get 50 new leads. Now of these 50 new leads, let's say 25 of them schedule. And then let's say of that, 10 of them show up. And then of that, let's say that 5 of them become a patient. This may not be a necessarily super realistic scenario, but I'm just doing it because it's kind of easy math and simple numbers. And so we can see here in each of these, this is the kind of drop-off rate, right? So these are the people that are initially interested. These are our leads, our prospects, our potential new patients. These are the people that schedule. These are the people that show up. And these are the people that actually ultimately become a patient. And so we can calculate our efficiency through each of these stages. So we can see right here, this right here, our lead to schedule conversion is 50%. And so the way we calculate this is basically number 2 divided by number 1. So for this example, we're going to go 25 over 50. And so this is our lead to consultation or appointment schedule, right? Whatever we send them to, either a consultation or appointment. So we have a 50% efficiency right here, basically. This one right here, you can see we have 10 over 25. And so this is 40%. And then we can see right here, again, this one right here is another 50%. And so in this case, if we track this whole thing right here, we can see this one's the lowest one. And so maybe we want to put extra effort right here into getting people to show up for the consultation or appointment they booked. So if we get this one up to, let's say 80%, then we could focus on one of these other ones because they're now lower. And so this is probably the easiest way of visualizing this whole thing. And this one right here is our lead to consultation or appointment / appointment conversion rate. This one right here is our show rate. This is the exact opposite basically of our no-show rate. So you remember earlier, whenever I was talking about consultations, I said we might have 3 out of 5 people not show up, right? So in this case, we have 60% of people are no showing and 40% of people are showing. And so this is kind of why I said, if we have all these numbers, maybe don't necessarily worry about calculating that one specifically. And then this one right here is our consultation to patient conversion rate. And so another one we might calculate is our lead to patient conversion rate. And so in this case, right, it's 10%. And we just call this overall either our lead to patient conversion rate or usually just lead conversion rate, or a lot of times just conversion rate. But this is our overall idea of basically how many people who are interested in our services actually end up becoming patients. And so this gives us an overall idea of the whole thing. And so it's 10%. And then, like I said, if we dive into all of these numbers right here, we can get an even more in-depth idea. And so if you want the exact formulas, I'll go ahead and put them up on the screen right here. And so you can just, pause the video and write them down if you want. But I think this one right here is probably, this pipeline example is probably a lot easier to visualize and understand than just going through the raw basic formulas and numbers. If you just go straight to an appointment, not necessarily a consultation, then basically what we would do is we would actually just take this one right here and we'd skip straight to this final number essentially. And so we'd skip the consultation phase. So as an example, let's go ahead and take that same scenario where we have 50 new potential patients, new leads. If we tell them that it's not a free consultation, they're coming in directly for an appointment they have to pay for, then usually we'll get a lower take rate. So let's say we only get 5 people who are interested in that, right? And then again, if we have our regular no-show rate, because usually this obeys our regular no-show rate for just appointments, not consultations. If we only have, like I said, a 10% no-show rate, then we would have 4.5 people show up, which, isn't actually possible. But basically, if we ran this campaign twice, right, and we had 100, it means we had 10 people who are interested in schedule, which means we have 9 total show up. And so in this one, we basically skip that intermediate step of the consultation to becoming a patient stage. And so we do slightly different math with this one. The essential formula for this one is our lead to appointment conversion rate. And we calculate this by the number of leads who schedule an appointment, and we multiply it by 1 minus our no-show rate. So we have our leads that's scheduled, which is our 10 right here. And then again, times our no-show rate, which is, like I said, 10%. And so this would essentially become 90% times 10, which is again our 9 right here. And so this is the main difference, is this thing goes straight to an appointment right here. But right here, this is our schedule rate. Our schedule rate is the same number calculation that we did earlier. And similar to the last one, we can go ahead and calculate our overall lead conversion rate right here. So, in this one, this would be 9%. Now, it's worth mentioning, you might want to do this whole step for every single kind of marketing that you do. So for example, if you do Facebook ads and Google ads, it's probably worth doing this kind of rough step, or at least the leads and patients that you see from each of these. You can break out those different things like the number of patients, the number of leads, the number of scheduled leads that you will see from each different marketing source, like I talked about earlier. Then you can easily see basically which one has the lion's share of the new patients that you're getting. So as an example, let's say that you see 50 new patients over whatever given period of time you want. And then let's say we have 5 that come from referrals. Let's say that 30 came from Facebook ads and 15 came from Google ads. And so this one, right, if we look at this, we might want to do more Facebook ads because that's where we're getting most of our patients from. What if we actually look at our leads and that kind of other stuff? We can see that one of them might be way more efficient. And so we just need to do more of that one. So as an example, let's say that our referrals and other sources right here, let's say this is 5. So this one's 100%. But let's say that our Facebook ads, we're seeing 300 leads in order to get this 30 patients. And let's say on Google ads, we're actually only seeing 30. And so you can see here, this one has a 50% conversion rate and this one has a 10% conversion rate. And so we might just want to do a ton more Google ads. And if we can 10x this one to get to the same number of leads that our Facebook ads are seeing, then this one should 10x as well. And so we see 300 and then we see 150 patients that come in from Google ads. And so you can see that in this kind of stuff where we have all this stuff and we just line them out, it's like in just kind of a spreadsheet, then it's really easy to just look at stuff and say, okay, one of these is really efficient and we should probably just increase this in volume and so we can get even more. And if we go even more in depth of this, if we have the number of hours that we are spending doing each of these, so again, let's say this one's 0. Let's say this one takes us 8 hours per week, then Google ads takes 0.5 per week. And so again, you can see that this one right here, Facebook ads is super inefficient. And I went back to our original estimate of Google ads here, but Google ads is super efficient. Doesn't take us very much time, right? We have a super high conversion rate and it's probably going to be the easiest to scale up, right? Referrals and that kind of stuff. I mean, this one's also super high, but it's probably a little bit harder to scale up compared to just spending more on Google ads, right? And so again, if we can just kind of get a lot of data and then just look at it in a super quick, easy spreadsheet like this, then it makes it super easy. Another one we might want to look at is our traffic to lead conversion rate. This is our number of leads divided by our number of website visitors. Now you can do this same kind of thing on ads specifically. So the number of people that see your ads versus the number of people that become leads. And this one specifically, we're just going to be focusing on our website because usually the ad platforms will tell you that number exactly, but our websites don't exactly tell us this stuff. A lot of times you'll have click to calls or click to emails or website form submissions, that kind of stuff. And so if you have tracking set up where you can see the number of people who are visiting your website and then the number of people that schedule from your website, then again, this will just give us some more data on how overall efficient your website is. So as an example, if we see 10 leads from our website and we have 100 visitors over that same period of time. And so in this case, it's 10%. Again, you might not have this set up, but if we do, it just gives us more data and we can look at this. Usually if you have 10%, I mean, your website's fine. The only reason you'd want to maybe look at your website is if this is actually like 1 out of 100 in terms of your leads, right? So you have 1% conversion rate on your website. That's really low. Usually you'd want to increase that. So usually 10% for this kind of stuff, for services to leads, consultations, that kind of stuff is usually pretty good. That's usually about benchmark. Now, similar to our cost to acquire a customer, we also have cost per lead, which is the amount of money on average that it takes for us to get a new lead. So usually this has something directly to do with advertising. So for example, if we spend $1,500 on ads and we get 150 new leads, we can see our cost per lead is $10. But we could also do it overall for the whole thing, the whole business. For example, if we spent $1,500 on, let's say, Facebook ads, right, and we had 150, this would be for our Facebook ads specifically. But then if overall we spent, let's say, $3,000 on various different ads like Google and Facebook ads, and if we then saw 200 overall, then our overall cost per lead is $15. Usually we don't actually do it overall like this. Usually what we use this number for is we figure out what our cost per lead is per advertising source. And that gives us a benchmark or an idea of what we should be seeing in the future, which gives us a good idea, an early indicator of whether or not our specific advertising campaign is working compared to what we'd like to see. So as an example, let's say that we have two different campaigns we're running on Facebook. We have campaign A and campaign B. And campaign A, we know from previous experience that if we have $10 per lead, usually we're in a really good spot. And so for campaign A, we're getting $10, right? So we're, right on the money. We're where we're expecting to be per lead. And so this gives us an early indication, right? And then we have our, our pipeline of each step and getting them from being a lead to scheduling to showing up to becoming a patient. But let's say that in B, we're getting $50 per lead. This is usually just a pretty good early indicator. This one's probably not going to work. And so in this case, usually we just want to shut this one off, or, maybe we need to change it. But if we're seeing $50 per lead, we probably have a good idea that it's just too expensive and it's just not going to work very well for the specific campaign. And so then we would want to try a different one. So let's go ahead and put all of this together in an overall map of kind of how it works and what it looks like. So overall, we have cost to acquire a customer and LTV, and these are our two big metrics that basically tell us how good overall our entire marketing is. Right, and then obviously within this, we have PVA and our average revenue per visit, and almost kind of, I suppose, corollary, right? It's kind of the same thing, except on a shifted, a slightly different perspective, is our referred customer ratio and our churn rate. So LTV to CAC is a good number that tells us basically how profitable overall our advertising is. And our churn rate and referred customer ratio is kind of the same thing, except different. It's overall efficiency with our referral process. And so if we get it right, we have kind of a golden ratio of people are continuously coming in just from referrals, and we would grow even if we did nothing else in terms of advertising and marketing. Okay, so next we have what I like to call pipeline metrics. So at the beginning, we have our leads and our cost per lead. So these are our leads, right? The people that we can contact who may be interested in our services, and the average amount in advertising that we spend before these people essentially kind of raise their hands and show us that they're interested. From here, we have our schedules, right? And the bridge between these two is our schedule rate. We then have our shows and our show rate. And then if you do consultations, then the shows would turn into patients. And again, our bridge here is our consult to patient conversion rate. The overarching number here would be our overall lead conversion rate, or just conversion rate. And kind of as a bonus, we have our traffic to lead conversion rate. This is specifically for the website, but it could also be for our ads overall. And then also as a kind of bonus, we talked about looking at it all in a spreadsheet and comparing them all to see which of our advertising and marketing sources are the best and which one's getting us the most return relatively and which one we should put more focus into. So that's overall what I have for you. Like I said, I mean, it's quite a bit that we look at. Whenever we do this for clients, we look at even more comprehensive stuff and we do this whole thing for them. And so if you're interested in anything like that, I've left a link at the top of the description below. You can click it and then schedule a consultation and we can see how we can help you with this kind of stuff and then implement solutions to improve your metrics. Like I said earlier, looking at the LTV to CAC ratio can give you a good indication of how well your advertising is working overall. And so if you want to see that video, click here. Otherwise, I hope this is helpful and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.